historically, 1924 is a pivotal year for the Muslim.
The downfall of Islam actually started at the end of Rashidun.
They flourished, like they expanded and they had more territory, they had more influence, they had more power, but the Islam in its core was only declining.
It was only the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who actually saw Jibreel in its original form, the way he is, the way Allah has created.
There are still organizations in every country and everywhere where the Muslims are existing.
Every single one of us, we do have a responsibility. The collapse of Ottoman Empire wasn't just a political defeat. It was a psychological earthquake. For the first time in history, the Ummah was left without an anchor. But the Muslim world didn't stay silent. A massive wave of revivalism surged across the globe to reclaim our lost history. We saw it in Egypt with the rise of Muslim Brotherhood, in Indonesia with mass mobilization of Sarkat Islam, in Africa through anti-colonial resistance, and of course, in Indian subcontinent with Khilafat and Jamaat Islami movements. They fought hard and they made the way for our political independence. But if we are honest, did they achieve the renaissance of Islam? We now have our own flags, but our legal systems, our economies, and crucially, our minds are still looking west. The state of Medina remains a dream, and many of these movements have stagnated. So the question is, what went wrong? Did we try to build the walls of a state before laying the foundations of faith? To discuss this crisis of modern Muslim mind, I'm joined today by my esteemed guest, Imran Nawazish. Imran is an engineer by profession and has a deep interest in Islamic history and current affairs. Assalamu alaikum, Imran.
Walaikum assalam.
How are you today?
Alhamdulillah.
Thanks for joining the show today. So, as I briefed in my intro, the collapse of Ottoman Empire in 1924, right? This could just be a event in the history for many historians. But for Muslims, it is not just an event. It is a collapse of an empire, a loss of an identity. And we can easily call it year zero. So can you paint a picture for year zero, 1924 for us?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Like historically, 1924 is a pivotal year for the Muslim history. So on 3rd of March 1924, Turkey decided that we are going to become a secular republic state, and we cannot carry the weight of Islamic Caliphate. The institute that came into being 1300 years ago went through phases of the Prophet himself, the Rashidun Caliphate, Umayyads, Abbasides, and then eventually Ottoman. But in the end, in 1924, they were at the crossroads of choosing a caliphate if they will carry it forward, or they will choose a different modern way of governing the state itself. And unfortunately, they opted for the later one. But then the whole Muslim Ummah, but it was not a commodity for Turkish only, but then overall the Muslim Ummah responded to that event in different forms of shapes, and new countries came into being. And since that day, that institute that was initiated by the Prophet lost, like officially it ended.
No, that's the true picture of history. So Imran, if we can dig further down into this discussion, so can you tell us what actually went wrong that we lost our glory in 1924, what we just called as year zero for Muslims, especially for our history? As you rightly pointed out, the glory started from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba through Rashidun Caliphate. They carried through it, and then we saw that at the end of the Caliphate of Ali radiallahu an, or even before that, from the middle of the Caliphate of Osman radiallahu an, the situation were going south anyway. So we saw the situation were not in control in the Muslims' hand. So can you tell us actually what went wrong?
Yeah, so we can look into this question in phases, and the reasons were the same every time there was a transition, but at least Muslims were able to retain the institute as a caliphate for the Muslim Ummah. So they were like mainly 4 to 5 phases, we can say. Like first one, the Prophet being himself on the face of the earth and running the Muslim Ummah from Medina. Then the second phase come the time of Rashidun, which lasted for like more or less 30 years. Then Umayyads came, then Abbasides came, and then Ottoman stayed for like 7 centuries. But if you look at it like at every transition, the reasons of the collapse or that caliphate itself losing power were the same. There were like administrative issues, economic downturns, internal clashes within the family, and then the misgovernance and non-cohesiveness between the people and the caliphate. But still, like the caliphate itself survived until the Ottomans. But one thing that we lost at the very beginning, and then it took 1300 years to fully collapse, was the disconnect between the Islam and the Muslims. So Islam, we can say like it peaked at the time of the Prophet and throughout the Rashidun Caliphate. But after that, we lost something really precious, which was the governing system provided by the Prophet, followed by the Rashidun. But later down the line, it became a family-run caliphates, and that kept on deteriorating up till 1924, and eventually it collapsed.
How would you differentiate between Islam and Muslims? Like just in your response, you just mentioned that is the downfall of Islam actually started at the end of Rashidun Caliphate, but Muslim continued. So how would you, because for a commoner and day-to-day Muslim, these two are synonymous terms. So Islam is Muslim, Muslim is Islam, but you are portraying it as two different things.
Yeah. So there are opinions on that, but if I answer this question from the political lens, so the answer is in the terms itself. So Rashidun means the rightly guided, and or like across the like Sunni Islam, there is a consensus that those were up to Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Hassan. Those were the Rashidun Caliphate. But something happened after that title did not carry forward. So then we changed the name of it. And if you look at from the political lens, so that was the last after Rashidun, it became a family politics. So father after son, that continued like during the Umayyads. After that, at least like the same bloodline stayed within Umayyads. And when the shift came, the same behavior we saw in Abbasides. Once Ottomans took over, the same behavior. So something that was very pious that the Prophet left with the Rashidun and Rashidun kept it was lost in that governing system, that how the caliph will become the caliph in the Muslim world. So from there onwards, like Islam started declining after that. Like Muslims still like they flourished, like they expanded and they had more territory, they had more influence, they had more power. But the Islam in its core was only declining, and it took it like 1300 years to get to the point where caliphate couldn't survive.
So what I understand from what you just mentioned, that the true essence of Islam, what was taught and preached by Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and practiced by earlier Muslim Sahaba and then through Caliphate, that true essence wasn't there. It died down or diluted to a degree.
Exactly. Like we can say that like it continuously deteriorated in a point, but since it was such a powerful institute that was developed, it was divine, it took like more than 1,000 years to the point where Muslims were not capable or competent enough to carry it forward.
Yeah. So if we see in a seesaw term, so the rise of Muslims and then the decline of Muslims. So if Muslims are declining, so some other power is on the rise, right? So that was the Western powers. So Imran, can you tell us that how West was able to achieve the glory and the dominance across the globe that they did?
Yeah. So if you look at the same timeline, it is quite fascinating. So from like 1570 to 600, from the time of the Prophet, though like in response to your previous question, I highlighted that what all went wrong for like 600-700 years, but it is also called the golden age of Islam. Like in the books, you will find that term. So some like quite a few things happened in a very good way. Like when it comes to philosophy, astrology, science, expansion, military, navy, Muslims were at the top of their game. They were acing it, and throughout the Umayyads time and the Abbasids time, Islam like expanded up to like southern Europe and Western Africa and up to Indonesia and Malaysian islands. So from that expansion was happening, it means something was being done really good until the point in 1258 when Mongols hit Abbasides, and then that was the biggest hit in the center of the Islamic history, from where like Abbasids got defeated, and then Ottoman had to come in. At the same point, after that, we saw a decline in all the disciplines where Muslims were flourishing, but they started declining. They started declining in philosophy and scientific evolution, astronomy, military. That the decline started. At the same time, West's hierarchy, like over the exponential rise, started around the same time. So they call it dark ages when the Islamic golden age was going on, and then around 1200 to 1500, they the it is called medieval breakdown of the West, where the people started distancing themselves from the church, and that perception came into the people that church, along with the emperor, they are having their Western interest, and those are not being transferred to the people. So this was for the first time where the Western philosophy or the people with the Western values, the people started distancing themselves from the religion or the religion-based governance. And then on top of it, another thing that went in their favor was their repulsion from the divine causation, and then dependency on only the observable universe. That's where like science came in and the Western philosophy came in, where like the Newtonian area, Newtonian physics came in at the same time. Galileo was there. So all of that came together, and that pushed back the religious hegemony of the clergy backward. And from there onwards, Europe started to rise. And this is exactly the same timeline where Abbasides got hit by Mongols and they started going down, and then Europe started to gear up. And then after that, it followed the Industrial Revolution, the Technological Revolution, until 1924, where the difference was so big that after World War One, Ottomans collapsed. So the graph goes like this.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, Imran. So my question is, in Europe, especially in the Renaissance era, what was the role of church for people to cause rebellion against the church or against the ruling elite and the religious clergy? What was the role of church in that?
Actually, that's where the economic factor plays a fair role, and then the reason as well. Eventually, like with the emperor and the clergy, it went to the point where people were able to see that they are the beneficiary of the systems. They are leveraging. They are having good lifestyle. They are having the luxuries of the world which are available at the time, where the masses were not getting any of that. Those were being crushed during the Crusades, and they were just doing the fights, and all the wealth was being confiscated by the emperor and the religion.
Yeah.
And at the same time, which caused a revolution, was the illogical reasoning coming from the religion, and all the reasoning which was coming from the masses in terms of science and their logic, those were not able to compete with the religion. And the typical example is the flat Earth. So Galileo was of the opinion that okay, the Earth is round and we are revolving around the sun, whereas the clergy was saying that they had the interpretation that the Earth is flat and sun is revolving around the Earth. So when those narrations happened, but since religion was not having an evidence to
prove their
prove that point, they ended up crucifying Galileo.
Yeah.
So all of these reasons, like there was a massive disconnect between the masses when it comes to logic, and logic was coming with the evidence, and religion was having no grounds to stand.
Yeah, I remember this flat Earth philosophy, I would say, or theory. It was quite prevalent in the Muslim scholars as well, early Muslim scholars. Even to date, it is 1920. It is 2026 now. Some scholars, they still follow the interpretation of the previous scholars who have written in their books that the earth is flat in tafsir of the Quran or in their own literary books. And some of the scholars, they still follow in the letter and spirit, although science has proved that we have satellite in the space, we have international space satellite station, we have imagery, all sort of evidence to prove that earth is not flat, right?
Absolutely.
So definitely this is something that if religion will have no basis to prove a point, then it will be rejected. This is but not natural. So that's a quite interesting point, Imran, over here. So yes, as we mentioned in the previous point, as you mentioned in the previous point, that Islam declined and the West was rising. So of course, whenever there is a loss of power, people try to reclaim their lost glory. So can you tell us, Imran, that after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, after the fall of the Muslims, how was the response from the Muslim across the globe?
Yeah, as we discussed, it was such a huge event in the Islamic history. So it was evident that it will get a response across the Muslim Ummah, across the Muslim world, and that's exactly what happened. So, like starting with Indonesia, like which was under the Dutch rule at the time, so they also responded, and they had caliphate conferences in 1924 that if they can agree on if we can have a consensus on a caliph, but that failed. They couldn't reach a mutual consensus that who should be the caliph of the Muslim Ummah. Similar kind of conferences happened in the Egypt in 1926. I think like quite a few conferences happened, and the agenda of those conferences used to be that if Muslim Ummah can agree on this caliph, so that we can retrieve that. Similar kind of response happened across the northern Africa, where they tried different interpretation of Sufi Islam, that if this has been lost, we can get into the like the way of saluk, and everyone follows a certain Sufi scholar, and that person become a guide,
The next,
or
caliph.
yeah, the person you can follow,
Yeah.
or a caliph, or like a unified governance mechanism can come back into the place. But a very massive mass movement happened in India as well, which was happening from 1919. Like it was already happening since for 5 years before it collapsed in 1924, where Muslims of Indian subcontinent were supporting the Ottomans, and pushing back the narrative of Ottoman getting collapsed after the World War. And that momentum was already built, and that continued to support and develop a narrative in support of the caliphate. But then it created a divide as well, and quite a few different approaches came. But the philosophy to revive the caliphate stayed very strong in Indian subcontinent as well, and it is still continuing today.
So from these different efforts that was happening in the Muslim world, across the Muslim world, starting from Indonesia to Africa to Egypt to Indian subcontinent where Britain were ruling, if we can categorize all these efforts into two streams. One is more a traditionalist approach, for example, the Sufism or the Deoband movement, for example, and one is a more modernist approach, right? So a modernist approach would mean that since we are a dominant population now, we are not in power. So let's accept that reality, and then strategize ourselves according to the situation. And the more traditionalist approach was that, what I understand from your response earlier, that we got nothing to do with the system today. It is so powerful that we cannot compete. So let's go to our masajid, our seminaries, and our just lock ourselves up, and nothing to do with dunya so much, right? So these are the two approaches that I can see from your description. One is the more traditionalist approach, and one is more modernist approach. So if that is the case, can you expand a little bit more on what the traditionalists were doing in their methodology?
Yeah. So, in order to give a balanced and neutral response to both the ideologies, one thing which is very important to be stated is that like Muslims had never gone through this phase ever before.
Yeah.
So as we discussed that since the time of the Prophet, the Caliphate was there for 1300 years. So that was an event happening in the Islamic history for the first time,
Yeah.
that the institute that was initiated by the Prophet himself is not there anymore. So that is like off-road territory for the Muslim world now. So everyone was responding based on their best interpretation with the good intention that how to handle the situation. So as to answer your question, in that scenario, the traditionalist, they took the approach and everyone established few facts. So the traditionalist approach was that like that this is a fact that the caliphate is broken down. We are not in a position to reinstate caliphate because they had seen that what happened in the conferences in Indonesia, what happened in the conferences in the Egypt. So they come up with a consensus that it is not feasible because of the ground facts that we can get a caliph again to make us one ummah and we get governed under them. But they incline towards that the need of the hour is that like we stick to the Islamic law, we develop on the fiqh, and we keep the masses close to the message of Islam at this stage. And for that, the emperor or the governor is not important. Ulama and the scholars are important.
Yeah.
At least as long as the people would have a connection with the scholar, they will continue to get Islamic guidance, and then we will continue to revive at least the message of Islam. And their study was that like we will disconnect from at the time we were under the British rule, like Indian subcontinent were under the British rule. We will not engage with them. We will divorce them fully. We will like go into the isolation and then stay in the madrasas and khankas, and we will attract people into those madrasas and give them the religious knowledge.
Yeah.
And their dalil or the argument was being driven by the people in the cave, as it is stated in Surah Al-Kahf. Like when those young men, it came to them that they cannot fight the emperor, and the only way is to like get into the cave and then just protect their iman. That kind of an argument they put forward, and then they said that these are our caves and we are staying in the caves.
Before I put the next question, do you think the time and age that we are living now, I'm again saying this is 2026, the batil, or the unjust system is so powerful. And I also remember a hadith from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in which he said more or less means that there will be a time that it will be very hard to save yourself from interest, from usury, right? Even if you are not directly involved in it, its duhan, its smoke will still reach your nose, right? You'll still inhale the evil of the system in a sense. Do you think some people will be just to say that today, because the unjust system or the batil system is so powerful, so let's go to the traditionalist approach in today's context?
I would say like there are people with this philosophy, and they do communicate this message, and but if you look at with the lens of Islamic teachings, at least like from my perspective, it is just running away from the fact. Like it is in a flight or fight mode. You are taking a flight mode.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. We shouldn't actually. If we want to reinstate the lost glory of Ummah, we have to be in the field.
Yeah.
Confront the situation head on.
Yeah.
Instead of just taking a flight mode, as you said.
Yes.
So coming back to the point, our discussion, that was a tangent. So we discussed in a bit of a detail the ideology or the philosophy and the methodology of the traditionalists. So what were the modernists doing in their ideology?
Yeah, interesting. So like I will again build up from the same answer, that as much as it was a new territory for the traditionalists, so it was for the modernists. So they came up with a whole different approach towards the problem, where the fact was the same, that we are under the British rule. We are not ready to fight them. We will not be able to push them out or put a caliphate in position. But instead of divorcing them, let's collaborate with them. They are the fact of the time. They are ruling us. They are holding to the power. So it is in the best interest that we work with them and then stay influential in the affairs of
Yeah.
the region.
Yeah.
The second reasoning for that was very strong, and that needs to be said, that this system was heading towards democracy. Like those teachings or those values had started to come, and that made and it was very clear to like the flag bearer of that approach was Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan.
Yep.
So he said that like it is very evident that when it will come to numbers, uh, Hindus of the Indian subcontinent, they are way bigger in number.
Yeah.
They are already collaborating with the Britishers, so they will get the hang of the education system, the science that they are coming, the logical reasoning, and those values which are coming. They will be the beneficiary of the system, and if we will go into the isolation, we will stay in that isolation,
Yeah.
and we will
Yeah.
never be able to get to the point where we can hold influence. So that was his interpretation of the facts or the occurrences which were happening at the time. So then instead of divorcing, he said that okay, we will form the university and the college, which was like a response to Madrasa and Khanka,
Yeah.
and that was Anglo-Mohammedan Oriental College, and that was his place of that was kind of his office. That the people will join school and university, they will study logic, they will study reasoning,
Yeah.
and then they will collaborate with the power of time, which were the British, and then stay influential there. So all the bureaucrats, engineers, lawyers from the Muslim community, they used to come from that college. But
And
where
that's
he
the same college which eventually evolved into Aligarh University.
exactly,
Right.
so
Yeah.
later on it became
Yeah.
Aligarh University. But where he went off track was that like he declined to accept the metaphysical facts or the interpretations or the message of Islam, because since the Western values were coming from the observable universe, which you can prove through the scientific
Yeah.
methods,
Seeing
as
is believing.
seeing is believing.
Yeah.
So all those interpretations of the Islam or the core message of Islam or the belief system of Islam, which were not falling under the physical and mathematical and experimental methods of science,
You just rejected.
he started to reject those.
Yeah.
And then it even got to the point where he declined the existence of the angels, and that was like one of the core beliefs of the traditionalist Muslim.
Yeah.
So that's where the clash really happened. So with all good intentions, in order to collaborate with the Britishers and to make sense out of scientific methods,
Yeah.
uh, he declined to
Yeah.
accept the metaphysical principles and the laws of Islam.
We cannot question anyone's intention, but when it comes to the core of any theology, and our theology is definitely based on unseen, right? Because it was only the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who actually saw Jibreel in its original form, the way he is, the way Allah has created him, only twice. But at other times, throughout a span of 23 years, he was receiving um, Allah's divine message, Quran, through Jibreel, but through a metaphysical way. He wasn't seen, he was just experienced. So if we remove angels from the equation, the Islam won't exist. Just like if we remove cross from Christian theology, the Christianity will collapse, right? So it was probably, if I use the lighter term, a big mistake. I was going to use a harder term, but with due respect to him, whatever he did, alhamdulillah, may Allah accept that. But that was a big mistake in my opinion, to deny angel, because Islam won't exist then. Yeah, okay. Now that's a good interpretation, Imran. Thanks for that. So if we have two different approaches as a response to the Western dominance over Muslims. Now, if we can draw parallels, okay, we shouldn't draw parallels. Okay, let's put it this way: can we discuss these two different approaches and see, did they succeed on the criteria that they set for themselves? Let's start with traditionalists.
Yeah. So, like if you look at the impact and come up with some parameters at how we can assess the impact of their philosophy or the approach they took, you will see a stark difference in the outcome. So if you look at the reach of traditionalist, that there was a very big reach. Like if you just take the Deobandi school of thought,
Yeah.
they expanded into the masses. They had their masajid, they had their madrasas. They were like masses received the message. So there's a very strong inclination of the society
Yeah.
towards that approach.
Yeah.
If you look at their political influence, that was very minimal. So they were not
Yeah.
able to add anything back to the governance of the society.
Yeah.
So since their approach was of the isolation, when it comes to scientific methods or the technology or the evolution that was happening, they were reluctant to that as well. So they were not participating. So the intellectual evolution that was happening of the human with the new inventions coming, typical example, loudspeaker.
Yeah. Very
The
famous
printing
example,
machine.
yeah.
Like people would understand that really
Yeah,
quickly. That
yeah.
okay, what is their position? Even if it is beneficial for me to use it to convey my message, but I will not use it, not because loudspeaker in itself is a halal equipment,
Because
but
it
since
came
it
from
is
the
coming
West.
from my enemy, I'm not going to
I'm not
use
gonna
it.
take it.
If
Yeah.
they are going to have food on the table, I will decline to sit on a table and have food. I will still sit, even if it is as per the sunnah, but I will decline to do that. So that kind of a very hardline approach came, but that got into the masses and masses followed that. But that took away the influence they could have in the society with the powerful entities of the society, but they were not collaborating there. But when it comes to the religious interpretation of the issues, that's where they excelled. So they had their fatawas. They were like, though they were in the khanka, they were getting deep into the knowledge interpretation, that how we can interpret the Islamic laws into the new things which are happening. But at least the scholarship was getting developed there. So if you look at those responses, you will see that there are wins and losses there. But if you look at the core parameter, were they able to get any influence on the power? The answer is no. They were not in the mainstream politics. Were they able to reinstate caliphate? No, they couldn't do it. So if you look at like the parameter they set for themselves, there are wins and losses. But if you look at the base principle, you cannot say that yes, they were successful.
I personally do have a soft corner for the traditionalists, especially in the Indian subcontinent, that at least they were, but yes, I agree they were unable to influence in the political arena. But as far as Qala Allahi wa Qala Rasul is concerned, the core of the religion is concerned, they were able to, do very well actually. Scholarship got mature as time progressed. We got a huge number of ulama being produced, although just on traditional basis. But yes, that was their objective and their motive, anyways, that they set for themselves.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment on that. It would be very well timed. That also tells you about the society as well. Like society, by and large, were more inclined towards that approach. Like the mass mobility and mass reach of that philosophy was way stronger in numbers as compared to the other one.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we discussed traditionalist approach against their own set criteria, and we established that yes, they succeeded to some extent against the criteria that they set for themselves, but they failed to reinstate caliphate or participate or contribute to the to the movement that was happening to reclaim the lost glory. Okay, how would you rank the modernists on that scale?
Oh, it is exactly inverse. So as I was saying earlier, when it comes to the mass reach, modernists failed there miserably. Like the mass reach was not there, and as much as they were trying to prove Islamic history or the message of Islam with the lens of science, they were getting into a rabbit hole. Like even when it came to the interpretation of miracles, so the passage of the river by the prophet Moses, the interpretation was that like it was not the staff of Moses that caused it by the will of Allah. It was a high tide and a low tide.
High tide and low tide, yeah.
Yeah. So those interpretation were taking Muslims further away. So that reach was not there. But at the same time, as I said earlier, like the influential people of the society, those were all coming from Aligarh. Like all the doctors, engineers,
Yeah.
bureaucrats, philosophers, lawyers, which were like governing the system, which were becoming part of the intelligentsia, or you can say the status quo, and then competing with the Hindus, collaborating with the Muslims, with the Britishers, getting into the power. Those all were coming from
Aligarh.
that school of
Yeah.
thought that okay, we are going to approach that. But again, like if you look at it with a very critical lens, that the philosophy was that like since Hindus will get access to the power and advantage because of their numbers, we should at least penetrate that. So from that lens, yes, they were successful. They were able to penetrate those corridors. But eventual outcome, what they were trying to achieve was exactly the same. That okay, how we can put them eventually in power, but that did not happen. So and eventually, like another credit that goes to him, he was the first one. He did not say it explicitly, but put the seed of two nation theory. That okay, they are different from us. We have to compete with them, and we cannot coexist. So the later down the line, that an interpretation played a key role in giving clarity to the people where you have to position yourself.
That's a good explanation, Imran. Thank you. Taking our discussion further, yes, there were mass mobilization within Muslim Ummah with primarily two different approaches, traditionalists and modernists, and ultimately they failed to claim their ultimate goal, to reinstate the glory and reinstate the caliphate as an institution. Can we discuss about what were the reasons for their failures as a collective movement?
Who, sorry, modernist or
Both. Let's So now think both of them are part of a bigger movement.
Yeah.
But the movement itself failed.
Yes.
Right.
So
what were the reasons behind that?
I would say like these two philosophies were thesis and antithesis of each other because they had taken an extreme position on almost all of the matters. So that gave birth to the synthesis, and then that gave birth to the Islamic movements, where like from a very critical lens, you can easily observe that religious authority stayed with the traditionalist,
Yeah.
and intelligentsia stayed with
the modernists.
with the modernist.
Yeah.
So it was very important to synthesize these two powers to unleash the potential of the society. So that's where I would say like Islamic movements came in, and they built up on the narrative that this is not working,
Yeah.
that is not working either.
Yeah.
So they both are not driving people or overall community into the direction where we have to head. That is like the reinstation or renaissance or revival of the Muslim Ummah. But then they took a very pragmatic approach that we need the religious authority. So that always stayed paramount. But they took that religious message to the universities, schools, and colleges
Yeah.
so that the intelligentsia can upscale their religious knowledge, have the logical reasoning and the Islamic interpretation of the modern science and technology, so that comes in and meet at the center point, and then that would give the complete picture. So they both failed because of their own reasons. Like traditionalists failed because of lack of intelligentsia.
Yeah.
Modernists failed because lack of religious authority.
Yeah.
Society was inclined towards religious authority,
Yeah.
but not competent enough, or intelligentsia was not competent enough to run them. So they both were coming towards central ground. That's
Yeah.
where the
Islamic
synthesis was happening and
movements,
Islamic
yeah.
movements came
So
in.
now this is a third entity into the picture. So we have traditionalists as far left and modernists as far right, and just in the very middle somewhere are the Islamic movements. So can you name few Islamic movements? Let's say, since we are discussing Indian subcontinent, because that's where mass mobilization was happening. A most happening part of the dominant Muslim world was India of that time. So what were the moments that originated from the thesis and antithesis of these things?
Yeah. So if I take the approach like and I would restrict myself to the Indian subcontinental area. So the flag bearer of this was Shah Waliullah. So he was the first one who came up with the foundation of how to exist in the modern world, or you can say that after the 1,000 years. Then after that, in the Indian subcontinent, Abul Kalam Azad was a very big name who was with the Congress, who was running this. From the traditionalist approach, Deoband school of thought that came in the late 1800s, they were also a flag bearer of the religious authority. Even like so, Sayyid Ahmad Khan was also part of the same school, but with very different approach. Later on, another big name that came was Sayyid Maulana Maududi, who established Jamaat al-Islami and wrote the Tafhim on the same principles.
Yeah.
And then later down the line, after 1947, Dr. Israr Ahmed played the key role and had a mass movement with the same philosophy into the people of Indian subcontinent. And now there are quite a few.
There are quite a few. So one name that you didn't mention, I don't know for what reason, but how would you, where would you place a Muslim League as a political movement, which actually delivered Pakistan, which is now divided into Pakistan and Bangladesh, but in 1947, so they were the driver behind this independence, if you like. So where would you place Muslim League as a movement in these traditionalist and modernist and Islamic movements? So do they sit in the middle or on the either sides?
Like my personal view on that is that Muslim League was a reaction to the Congress. Like and it built up on the same thought of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan that okay, that when it will all become democratic and it will come down to numbers, 50.1 will win over 49.9.
Yeah.
So we are not having a chance.
Yeah.
So then, and when it was evident that Britishers are weakening and they are losing authority and other powers are coming in, so at that point in time, in order to give a political landscape for the Muslim League came into being. And all of these parties acknowledged that, and they had some kind of a relationship with Muslim League. So Muhammad Ali Jinnah, like in the end, who is the founder of Pakistan and Qaid Azam, he's called.
Yeah.
So even up to one point, he was not very much inclined to join Muslim League. He thought of it as a reactionary response, and he believed in the coexistence of Muslims and Hindus in the Indian subcontinent. But then during when it became evident to him that Congress will never give the due right to the Muslims and the Indian or Hindutva philosophy will overtake everything, that's when Muslim came in. So, but overall, the political thought of Muslim League was in the middle and was built on all of these philosophies, which were like more core and linked to a person.
So, since we are discussing the reasons why Khilafah, we were unable to reinstate Khilafah as an institution. Now, these three different school of thoughts or different methodologies, if you like, what were the reason behind their, or especially if we focus our lens of Islamic movements, what was the reason behind them not being able to deliver?
On that one, there is a lot of opinion and response available in the scholarship. So there are responses from the Western neutral world as well. Within the Islamic community, there are a lot of kalam. So we will, in order to respond to that, I have to choose someone. So I would take Dr. Israr Ahmed's book, Revival of Islam, and the real work to do, which he wrote. So in that book, he had pointed out mainly two reasons. One is the overemphasis of this Islamic movements on the quick wins and the worldly gains. So they are not following the due process of uh, uh, the foundations or the principles laid by Prophet Muhammad, and they are rushing through that. And the second one is like they are not working on the core beliefs of the people who are part of those movement, so they become a more pious and Muslims with the strong belief systems who can then play an influential role in moving these movements to their finish lines.
So you said that overemphasis on the worldly targets, right? So, and since you mentioned you're referring to Dr. Israr Ahmed's book, The Renaissance of Islam, The Real Work to Do, right? Um, so, what's his suggestion that what should have been done instead of overemphasizing or emphasizing on the worldly target? So this is but natural that whatever target that you said, you work towards it,
Yeah.
right? If you're not working towards that target, then you are, as an organization, like, or as a movement or as a tahreek, you are failing actually if you're not progressing. So what's his opinion on that?
So my understanding of his interpretation or the solution to the problem is that, sorry, he agrees on the target. Like the target is the same for every Islamic movement, but the methods that you are adopting or the effort that you are putting in that direction, they are not actually taking you in that direction. So one of the first things that he did when he parted ways from Jamaat Islami was a mass message of Quran. So his core belief was that like Islam, and he used to give one example that if there's a pile of crushed wood and metal, and if you take a magnet over it, so it will let go the wooden crush, and it will attract all the metal. So he used to call that magnet Quran. That if you will take the message of Quran and take it to the society, so all the core Muslims with the right mindset and with the thirst of being part of these movements, Quran will attract them towards you. And then you work on their iman and make their belief system strong and take them through the tarbiyah or the training and the exercises and mujahida, so that they become real participants of those movements. And once they would be ready in good numbers, then a real change will come. So that was like his philosophy to leverage Quran in developing the people and then working on people so that they get better at the movement they want to be part of.
So you are saying that Dr. Israr's proposal is to use Quran as a device or as a tool to attract people so that they are able to understand the responsibilities they have towards the deen of Allah, being Muslims, and then organize them and then do their upbringing, do their tarbiyah on the Quranic principles. So you are saying like Quran is pretty much central to his proposal of true revivalism in Islam.
Yes, it's all like I agree with you on that. Like I understand his full philosophy and approach and action plan is centered around the interpretation of Quran and how we can follow the principles laid by the Quran to achieve the results.
Though this discussion is pretty abstract and philosophical at some times as well, but anyone listening to this conversation online, what do you think? What is the takeaway for them? What we should do? Let me give you a hypothetical scenario. A common Muslim, he has a good intention, right? He wants to serve Allah. He wants the revival of Islam. He wants to see the glory, but he doesn't know. He is not part of any organization. His interaction with the Quran is at a very basic level, at a recitation level, right? But he's praying. He's a good Muslim. He pays his zakat. He's done his Hajj and he fasts the month of Ramadan. So, what do you think is the message for the commoner on the street that they can really, pick up the actions out of the proposal?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that overall Muslims have done correctly, especially the Muslims of Indian subcontinent, is the identification of the problem. So I think it is very clear for last 100 years that what exactly was the problem, and that got picked by Islamic movements. One is that like at one end we are still having, if you take a general survey, that people who are part of the intelligentsia, they are still a bit far from the religion. So you will see that people are not are too good in the logical reasoning, in accepting the technology,
Yeah.
playing their part in the modern world.
Yeah.
But they lack the religious knowledge or the religious I would say the religious knowledge is there, but the core belief and conviction that this
You're
is
right,
the
yeah.
right path,
Yeah.
that is lacking. Or at the other end, if the people who have worked on that, they are not very much into playing their role in the grand scheme of things. Like they are very much confined to their limited space. So if you interpret that today as an action plan for anyone, for us and in general Muslim, is to do exactly the same thing, like have a strong foundation when it comes to modern science and technology and what all the evolution has to
Yeah.
offer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that should stood on a very strong foundation with conviction of a very strong belief system and the true knowledge of Islam and the message of Quran and the Prophet. So once we will have, I understand, a very good optimum balance of these two, then that will give birth to a complete Muslim, a complete personality that would then be very influential in playing the role.
So let's take example of a child being born. He's raised in a Muslim family, right? He goes to school. He goes to uni. Let's say he becomes a doctor and an engineer, right? And he goes to madrasa, and he learns how to read Quran, and the life goes on. Right? Graduates, finds a job, marries, and then his family starts. So that's pretty much a very common life cycle, anywhere in the world without exception. But for Muslims, since Quran got a bigger role to play, so what do you think? What this person should change in his life that Dr. Israr's proposal of the Quran dominating, your life? So what need to change for a common person?
In your question, you will notice that you have touched on the two levels of human existence, but not the third one, and that is missing. So you have an individualistic existence, then you have a family system, and then there is a community which is like going
It's true.
as one big ship with a very big inertia.
Yeah.
So if a person is getting into the madrasa and getting that knowledge on the individual basis, really good.
Yeah.
He has gone some through the university and college, taken a degree on the individual basis, very good.
Yeah.
He is married to a woman and giving living a life with a family.
Yeah.
And following those principles, very good. But when it comes to the third level, where you are part of Ummah, what role are you playing actively, as much as you are concerned for yourself as an individual and for your family? Do you have the same sense of the responsibility when it comes to that level? Yes, good. Then what are you doing about it? So I think once that's where either we are lacking, or if we are even part of something that is very confined and limited, and that's what is in the bigger scheme of things or the equation, that factor I think is missing.
No, that's all right. But I think we need to think about it, because this is a response that people would want to hear from this discussion. What actually needs to change? Okay, yes, the third dimension that you brought in as a person in the society got a bigger role to play. But yes, he's playing a role as a, let's say, as a blue collar job, maybe a plumber or whatever. He might be an accountant in an office. He might be a doctor in a hospital. He might be a professor in a university, right? So whatever knowledge of the world that he gained, he's giving back, right? But it is not gonna take Ummah out of misery, right? That's a given. So when what is my question is, what this common man on the street, or a doctor in a hospital, a professor in a university, normal people, we have no question on anyone's intention, right? They are praying 5 times. They're good Muslims, right? But what they need to change, what mindset needs to change, so that they can play a bigger role in the revival of Islam.
I would say, like, I'll just build up on my previous answer, that in order to play a role in the society, so that person has to look for what avenues are available in the Muslim Ummah currently, where they are heading in that direction. So there are still organizations in every country and everywhere where the Muslims are existing,
Yeah.
who are having this as a goal. and they are working on a plan. At least, so like currently they are at very minimalistic like time and resources available to them, but that those needs to be strengthened, and then they will come together to get to the bigger goal. Because one thing, like the message that I would like to give in this, or response I would like to give to that question is that individual, the way it has become part of a family and bringing up his or her family, likewise he or she has to become a part of an organization as well that is having a much bigger goal.
Yeah.
And then before you enter into any organization, just assess that is its values, goals are in alignment with what you have understood from the Islamic teachings and the studies that you have done. Once that alignment in value would be there, that values will give you strength in your behavior and thought process, and then thought process will make you push you to take those actions, which will be in alignment with your goal.
No, that's a good response, Imran. I really like the idea that no Muslim is just an individual. Yes, we are individuals. Yes, we are family men. Yes, we are professionals. But we need to find organization, any group of people, any club, any society that aligns with our ideology, the way we think Islam is. Find them and join them, right? I just want to spend the last few minutes on the topic that how Quran, or how our interaction with the Quran, our daily or weekly interaction with the Quran, it needs to change from what we are doing now. So what we are doing now is majority of the Muslims, so this is a reality bite actually. The majority of the Muslims don't read Quran, even as a ritual practice, right? So that's a fact. Let's accept that. Move on. There is a small majority which do read, but don't understand. And even a smaller majority is who understand, but they keep it to themselves, right? And those who are in a position, or they have some urge or some energy in them, that they go out and spread the message of Islam, they are even lesser, right? And amongst those people who actually challenge the system, they are even smaller in number. So you see, from a very wide base of having no contact with the Quran, to those who actually read it as a ritual, those who understand it, those who just keep it to themselves, and then those who just preach it as a teaching and preaching, and then those who actually challenge the system. So my concern is that, Imran, we have a huge potential of human resource untapped. How we can make them understand that Quran is not just hasanat.
Yeah.
It is a catalyst of change. It is the device that Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to, change Umar the way he is known today. So what needs to change for the Muslims of today?
I will just take the same question into the back order. So the answer to that question is that every Muslim should take the message of Quran to others who are not having that message. In order to take that message, you have to be practicing and acting on the message that you are taking. In order to do that, you need to understand that message so that your actions represent that understanding.
You're right.
In order to do that, you should be able to read the book.
Yeah.
And you will open the book. As you said, that quite a few people are not reading it. The main reason, if you will see, would be lack of conviction. So eventually, it comes to that you have a very strong belief. Once your belief is strong, you will open the book. Once you will open the book, you will learn to read. And once you will read, you will ponder upon it. And what you will learn, you will accept, you will practice it, and then you take the message out. So that will again, I'll go back to the example of Dr. Israr, that then you will become a magnet yourself, and you will attract people towards you. And then and if you are part of that, you can connect them to the bigger goal. But at the same time, I would just like to emphasize on the same problem that this, and Quran will take you there as well if you are the right interpretation, to be part of the modern methods, to adopt what all tools are available. This is the message from the Quran, this is the message from the Prophet's life, that along with the message, use the means and then get to the destination.
Yeah, no, that's a response very well articulated, Imran. Thank you. So probably we can conclude the discussion here, and if you allow me to summarize what we discussed, is that um, 2026, the Ummah has lost its glory, long lost. It's a past memory now. But as individuals, every single one of us, we do have a responsibility. Um, we accept it or not, but the responsibility is there. And as it was the Quran that our Prophet ﷺ used to change the lives and the mindset of the earlier Muslims, that is the same tool which is going to work for us today. We need to change our approach when it comes to handling of the Quran, how we handle the book of Allah. This is the book, this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the spoken word of Allah, right? So it is very, though it is glorious, but it is very heavy as well. So we need to come out of our shells, come out of our comfort zones, and confront the system if we really want to participate in the movement of reinstating the lost glory of Imran. So with that said, Imran, I really appreciate your time today, and thanks for coming, and we'll meet in the next episode whenever it is, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.